We welcome to the lectern the Honourable Duncan Gay, MLC. Following Minister Gay's address, we move into a special transport panel session brought to us with the support of our partners at the Australian Rail Track Corporation and the New South Wales Government Initiative, Restart. We'll end today's proceedings with the motion submitted to conference concerning transport in the state. So we'll start the session with welcoming Minister Gay to the lectern. Duncan Gay is the New South Wales Minister for Roads, Maritime and Freight. He is also the leader of the government in the New South Wales Legislative Council and Vice President of the Executive Council of New South Wales. Duncan has been a member of Parliament since March 1988 and a member of the New South Wales National Party since 1974. Born and raised in Crookwell, he knows the bush and has led the campaign to fix broken infrastructure to get freight in and out of local communities and help businesses and farmers prosper. Duncan has championed some of the most successful reforms and programs delivering benefits for regional New South Wales, including bridges for the bush, fixing country roads and rail, grain harvest management scheme, and removing the red tape, including increasing width concessions for transport of wool, hay, straw and cotton bales. Will you please welcome Duncan Gay.
Thanks, Derek, Matt, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the invitation to be here. It's great to be here. It was even better as a surprise to see Ian and Sarah receiving their awards when I first arrived. What's so great about being here, I guess, is that every single person in this room wants to get better outcomes from where we live. As Derek said, I'm a farmer from Crookwell. My background, my aspirations and my concerns are the same as yours. I've been Roads Minister for 5 years now, which is good and bad. It means that I've got experience, but you've got to be careful that you don't get in a rut. After 12 months, I'd outserved 6 of my 7 predecessors. Amongst them, there was 1 or 2 good ones, but they'd never got a chance with the money or the ability to be able to know what they were doing. I have to say, we came into the race well behind the start line. In many cases, we've spent a large amount of time fixing 16 years of neglect, where it's fair to say the focus and funding of the previous government stopped at the borders of Sydney, Newcastle and Wollongong. Smart and sensible decisions did not prevail under their watch. Your businesses suffered because of it. My role was to come in and turn this around. I want you to look at some of the things that we've done. And it's important not just to look at what we've done, but where we're going. But it is important to know where we've come from. A favourite of mine, increasing width concessions for wool, hay, straw and cotton bales. Before, no concession provided in 16 years of the former government. Now, width concessions increased from 2.5 to 2.7 metres. Common sense, that's how it works. Before, 760 round bale cotton pickers forced to travel on low loaders. Now, exemption to allow 760 round bale cotton pickers to be walked up to 80 kilometres, providing a real cost saving and opportunity to growers. In 2009, the 110 kilometre speed limit dropped to 100 kilometres an hour on the Newell Highway. We made a promise to restore it to 110 speed limit so cars weren't mixing it with the heavy freight vehicles. A week after the election, I went out there with the then called RTA and we pulled down the signs, and as we pulled down the signs, people on the road were cheering. And I think it was 20 years since those guys from the RTA had someone cheer at them. You could see the smile unfurl across their faces as we pulled down these signs. And we had to hold our breaths for a moment to see if it would work, but it did work. The accident rate has gone through the floor. Instead of going up, it went down, and it just made a difference. Before, 4.3 metre high trucks only allowed on the Great Western Highway over the Blue Mountains. Now we ensure the 4.6 metre livestock crates can travel over the Blue Mountains, increasing access along this important route, guaranteeing that we can get 4 decks through there for efficiency. Before, no grain harvest scheme in 16 years. Growers and transport operators now provided up to 5% weight concession with a floating half tonne on the truck. This has been highly successful with 58 councils, pretty much all the grain growing council areas now signed up to the scheme. I got some figures last week that shows that more than 87% of grain deliveries during the summer harvest used the grain harvest scheme. The compliance rates are also much better than those operating in the scheme and those not in the scheme. I'll talk a bit later about farmers' involvement in local government. Before, ignored desperate pleas to introduce a livestock loading scheme. 25 years ago, you were passing motions at your conference that you needed volumetric loading. 25 years you had to wait for this one. We delivered a new livestock loading scheme in 2012 to allow producers and carriers to operate trucks at HML weights on selected routes and also with that floating half tonne. We've created the foundation, the incentive is there. We're starting to get good numbers of councils coming on board, and we're continuing to do more to get those local livestock routes really working well. But once again, I'll talk about councils later. Road trains, before were only allowed west of the dual highway. Now, we took the deep breath, we broke the nexus, and we've allowed modern road trains to operate on certain freight routes east of the Newell Highway. So we pulled the band-aid off and said, let's try it and see how it goes, and so far it's going pretty well. I'll say it again, these are smart, sensible decisions that were ignored. They weren't hard, they just hadn't been done before. They are the 1% gains or the small positive changes that have a major input on our businesses on a daily basis. As a government, it's critical that we get the 1%ers right. It's also essential to make bold decisions that deliver big change, even if they're unpopular at times. One of the most important decisions we made was to lease part of the poles and wires network. Not universal support within this room or this organisation. On the back of this decision, we have $6 billion extra to invest in regional New South Wales. And I was pleased to see you have motions telling us how to spend it. It means we have $500 million for fixing country roads to upgrade first, middle and last mile issues that can prevent productive truck movements getting directly to your farm gate. We started in 2011 with 3 modest projects. And through the first 2 rounds, we funded more than 140 projects across the state, which have delivered more than $200 million in infrastructure value. That's us, that's local government, and that's industry working together on these last mile issues. Projects like the Cabora Long Bridge, which is delivering real access improvements in the Gundagai Shire, it only took 14 weeks for the contractor to build and removes a middle mile issue on a busy B-double route, which was costing transport operators and growers wasted money and lengthy detours. This funding also means that we've got $400 million plus a $15 million pilot for our new Fixing Country Rail program. A program that is about upgrading our regional rail network to get your goods from the paddock to the port as fast as possible. It's also about getting heavier and longer trains operating on the network, building longer sidings, opening unused rail lines for the first time, and building passing loops. I want to take you through an example that showcases exactly what I'd like to see Fixing Country Roads and Fixing Country Rail work together to be able to reduce costs and produce a benefit to you. You could say fixing country rail is already in action in Ardleffen. We spent about $3.5 million to extend the rail siding by 750 metres, which together with some new over-rail loading equipment is expected to save 7 hours in train loading times by reducing shunting. This supply chain savings will be passed on to growers through lower freight costs. Then combine this with a successful Fixing Country Roads Round 2 project, which was announced last month, the Ardleffen Grain Hub Connectivity Project. This project involves the realignment of Baigoo Road to remove constraints and improve connectivity to the Ardleffen Grain Hub from the Newell Highway, Burley Griffin Way and Talimba area north of Ardleffen. It's joint funding between the New South Wales Government, the local council and industry, all three weighing in. The project will enable access for higher productivity vehicles such as road trains, and forecasts show that a 20% uptake for road trains will result in a reduction of more than 1,200 trips and 35,000 kilometres of travel on our roads in regional New South Wales per year, just out of this one initiative. This example illustrates what we want to see: getting more freight onto rail and reducing your transport costs from farm to port and helping safety. Back to poles and wires funding. A couple of weeks ago, we announced Fixing Country Truck Washers, a $10 million program to start upgrading and replacing vital truck wash facilities across the state. This will ensure that crates are cleaned properly between loads. It will get effluent spillage out of our main town centres and prevent weed outbreak on your properties. And it also means that your product, your fine lamb, your prime stock, gets to sale in a better condition. What's also so important about these programs is that funding decisions are made by an independent panel, of which your president is one of the invited members. The panel ensures industry determines where the funding is spent. It's not about people from Sydney, sitting in Sydney, making decisions about where money is spent in the country. It is you, the rural industries, making the decisions. This ensures money goes into our agricultural supply chains and we all see the benefit. On top of poles and wires money, don't forget we've also delivered record after record roads and freights budget funding. This year, and it's hard with figures, they just seem like book on book on book, we've got $9.7 billion. Well, I've got to assure you, that's a hell of a lot of money. To put it in context, the figure is more than the state budgets for Queensland, ACT, South Australia and Victoria combined. So if you added all those states, all those red states together, they would be less than the New South Wales roads budget. There's often talk about how much of my budget goes into the bush compared to the city. When tens of billions for metropolitan projects are talked about, it's assumed that's how much we as a government are spending. Well, that's not the case. If you take WestConnex, it is both government and private sector investment, and it has a tolling structure. If you look at it, it's a $16 billion project, $1.6 billion from the New South Wales Government, the same from the federal government, and a $2 billion loan. The rest will come from private capital and tolling. Whereas projects in regional and rural New South Wales that we're funding, where I'm spending 60% of my budget, are all government funded and not tolled. Not tolled. Significant upgrades on our regional road corridors, the Newell, Golden, Cobb and Silver City, once they're built, you won't be paying a toll to use them. And as I've indicated, 60% of my budget goes to projects in regional New South Wales, but don't tell the people down here too loudly that. This spend translates to a new $55 million Kapuka Bridge as part of our Bridges for the Bush program, which has also delivered the Tulladutta Bridge near Weewaw and the Holman Bridge in Goolagong. At Kapuka, we've replaced the dog-legged approaches and removed the only weight-constrained bridge on the Olympic Highway, removing another middle-mile constraint that was costing you money. It translates into the replacement of more than 1 million old timber sleepers with modern long-life steel sleepers and more than 100 new low-maintenance bridges and culverts in the western part of the state. It translates into major upgrades of the New England, Golden Princes, Newell, Great Western, Kings and Pacific highways. Every single metre of road we lay on these networks is helping move freight from our industry across our state. It also translates into $1.5 billion going direct to council and state road maintenance. Fixing potholes and cracked bitumen, our maintenance spend in the last 5 years equates to a 35% increase compared to the former administration. So we're 35% up compared to the old administration. As I've said, decisions about how money is spent is decided by industry, including New South Wales farmers. In 2012, we worked with industry to develop the first ever long-term map for infrastructure spend in the state. There's no point in us thinking up or dreaming up where you want to go. We got it directly from the people that needed it. Talking about where money is spent, a project getting a lot of attention right now, as was mentioned earlier by NFF, is the proposed Inland Rail project between Melbourne and Brisbane, which has a price tag of more than $10 billion. This is because, and quite rightly, parts of industry and certain parts of the state are telling us that they want to see this project delivered. As Minister for Freight in New South Wales, the benefits for our industries and local businesses have to be my priority. And I don't want your opportunities going north and south of the border. I want to see the first money spent for inland rail construction spent here in New South Wales. I want to ensure the $1 billion spend delivers standalone benefits regardless of whether the whole inland rail project is ever delivered eventually. My priority is to see work first delivered up north on the track between Narrabri and North Star, and from Narromine to Narrabri to support one of the most productive cotton and grain areas in our state. Infrastructure spend is critical, but we have to also keep making those smart and sensible red tape reductions to reduce the business burden. A fortnight ago, we provided access for road trains across the Carrathool Bridge after local farmers and your association raised the idea. The bridge is a heritage listed and is 92 years old, or young, depending on how much money we've spent on this wretched thing, raised the idea. The access is critical to getting to the Rivcot Gin. Rather than saying no, as we might have once been our response, RMS went away, installed strain gauges and put in CCTV to monitor and weigh truck movements. It's a perfect example of those 1%ers that I was talking about earlier. Today, I want to announce another sensible reform. Recently, you brought to our attention a frustrating situation whereby you can live in the same town and use exactly the same machinery as the guy next door, yet have different travel restrictions applied. I read of a situation in Bega where one farmer was given a 15-kilometre distance limitation and another in the same area was granted a 150-kilometre limitation for the same machinery. That's just stupid. It's just bloody stupid. It just doesn't make sense. I'm pleased to announce that the distance limitations for all agricultural machinery that is not over mass or oversized and is not required to operate under a permit or notice will now be scrapped. Gone finito. It's critical for me in removing these restrictions that we ensure that this machinery, which will be moving slower than other vehicles, can be seen. And for this reason, I have one small but very important requirement, that you use flashing lights on this equipment at all times. I'm also committed to working with the NHVR, the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, I hate these anagrams, to kick forward engagement on a national agricultural notice and get this delivered sooner rather than later. As a national notice would still require access approval from local councils for their roads and bridges, we must start to do the work and get the approach spot on from the start. I've asked the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, Transport for New South Wales and RMS to work closely with your organisation and your good people on this. Don't forget, and as I said earlier, councils own a very large percentage of the road network in New South Wales. We'll continue to inject money into council-owned roads through fixing country roads and grants, as well as getting out and engaging. But it needs action on the ground from industry as well. And my very strong suggestion to you is to become involved in your local council, even become a councillor, because whereas I can put the livestock loading in place, I can put the grain schemes in place, which makes sense, we've still got to get a large number of the roads in the area, which are the council roads, ticked off. And you, as part of the important industry in the area, remind them how many rates that you pay in the area and how not making these proper decisions is hurting your industry. That's where you should be, in the heart of it, making a difference. One other area we're looking at is primary producer concessions. I know some farmers have raised issues with the cost of registration in New South Wales. At the moment, primary producer concession provides about 60% discount on a commercial truck registration, 60% below what the professionals pay. On top of that, we're looking at whether there's an ability to reduce it some more. Some of you are telling us that it's cheaper over the border, and some of us are telling us that you're illegally doing that. I wouldn't recommend that, but we're listening to what you're saying. I think you would agree that in providing a further reduction, it is appropriate that it comes with a few requirements. In particular, I've noticed that other states require a distinctive primary producer plate, which I think makes a lot of sense. So on that positive note, that we're willing to look at reducing it even further, but to do it the same as the other states in the reduction with a primary producer plate. I look forward to continuing the journey together. There's a lot we've delivered, but we had a lot to do. We've got funding and a plan from you to go forward, and I'm always happy to have the farmers in or meet with you. This is the first time I've been invited to address you in many years of attending conferences, but I take it as a great honour. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you, Duncan. It's very pointed that you mentioned the Kapooka Bridge. That is the Olympic Highway at Wagga. It is an extremely dangerous bridge. There's been many accidents there over the years, so it's really great to see the funding there to remove that bridge out of the highway network, and a nice, gentle sloping crossing of the railway line, which was previously a right-angle turn to cross it. Look, Duncan has agreed to a couple quick questions, so if we can have a couple quick questions. Helen.
You, Duncan, for turning up today and giving your polished presentation. I'm from around Griffith, and one of our major issues there is the bridge between Moama and Echuca. Now, it's imperative that that bridge be rectified. Just to buy a piece of machinery from Victoria and move it up is just impossible for us. So with the roundabouts on the Moama side and the Echuca side, we need a police escort, and in the end we don't bother buying that piece of equipment. So when will that bridge be rectified and expanded?
On the election of the Turnbull government, that will happen. That was an election promise that was signed off just before the election. Joint funding from Victoria, New South Wales and the Commonwealth. It was the first time that the Commonwealth money had come into the agenda, and we've got the money locked in there. Our money comes out of our Bridges for the Bush money. It's been there for some time. I've got to say, I thought the chances of getting money out of Victoria was pretty remote, and I was pleased to see that happen. And the feds came in. The federal minister lives near there, and Michael McCormick and Adrian Pickley announced that during the election campaign.
I have two more quick questions. Paul Shoker and then the gentleman with his arm up. Yep, you're on.
Thanks, Minister Gay, for coming here firstly. And I guess coming from Coffs Harbour, I've got a couple of questions about the bypass. Firstly, not the bypass, sorry, the Pacific Highway upgrade. Firstly, I think we'd all acknowledge from the North Coast the great work that's been done there. But just before you came, there was a motion about burdening local government with cost shifting. So what assurances would you provide that the state government will look after the existing highway, which is still an important part, the old highway, sorry, which is still an important part of infrastructure, especially if you've got an incident on the new highway. I'm assuming you'd have to be using the old highway. For example, the Maxville Bridge, the state government is providing 10 years of funding to maintain that bridge. What would happen after the 10 years? And I guess in broader terms, what assurances are you providing that these roads are looked after still?
Well, as I indicated earlier, rather than making local government worse during our term in government, the increase in funding that we've made to local government is a quantum increase. The fact that one of your main local roads in the region happens to be the Pacific Highway, which has been a death trap in the past. It's now becoming safer and better, and that is a huge benefit. The bulk of people going between the centres will use the Pacific Highway, and the old Pacific Highway becomes a local route, so it'll be used even less. As we leave those, we enter into negotiations and sign agreements with the local government. And if your local council has signed a bad agreement, talk to them, not me.
Right, question up there. That'll be the last one. We have to move on to our panel session. Just a quick question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a congratulations on your announcement of the George Gregg, Tottenham District Council. Congratulations on your announcement of the primary producer's plate. This is something which operates in Queensland, Western Australia and I believe Victoria. And we have a motion on the books here. We're just trying to find it, which Tottenham put in many years ago, asking for this. So we can be just a little bit legal with moving, and we only ask for it west of the Newell Highway. If you can expand on that, all very well and good. But we have many vehicles that are used maybe once or twice from one property to another, and they're quite safe vehicles. But for us to go to the extent of getting registration for that one or two trips is quite onerous. And if we can do this the same as we do our tractors, on a guarantee that they are safe and therefore usable on the roads, I'll look forward with great pleasure to the introduction of the primary producer's plate in New South Wales. And thank you very much for that.
Thank you. And you summed it up. You said we have a joint responsibility. We will provide the plate, but we both need to make sure that the vehicles are of a standard that's acceptable. We all have our families on these roads.
Thank you very much, Duncan, and thank you for your time and coming to conference to share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.